Good afternoon, colleagues. We are so fortunate to have Mary Mountstephen from the UK to chat with us a little bit today about educational assessment and intervention of children with learning uniquenesses. I've had the pleasure of working with Mary for more than 5 years. I've learned so much from her, and we're really honored that you are joining us today, Mary. Tell us a little bit about your professional work. How did you get into this field?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure to spend time with you, Dr. Lynn.
Oh,
Um,
thanks.
I started off as a mainstream teacher, and then I took additional qualifications in special educational needs. I worked as a primary head at a couple of schools, moved into working with a big centre for dyslexia with students aged 3 through 13. And now I work as a learning differences consultant. I support some companies, I work with some schools, I do online training, all sorts.
You write beautifully,
I do
I will
that.
say. So we have attendees from, South Africa, Romania, Australia, and we're interested in kind of what's going on in the UK. What are the educational priorities for children with special needs and then learning differences?
Okay, well, at the moment, there are quite a few debates going on around the perceived lack of provision, particularly for children with who are autistic, in that a lot of the additional supports seem to be being withdrawn. At the same time, we've got an explosion, you could call it, in children and adults seeking ADHD diagnoses and assessments. So
Hmm.
the profile of learning differences is quite high in the UK right now, but it's not necessarily being matched with resources. The interventions are generally staged. They'll start with in-class support. There are legal structures that schools have to abide by. So if they're seeking extra support for a student, first of all, they have to show that they're providing a differentiated curriculum within the classroom.
Mhm.
Once they have the evidence of that and showing that that's not meeting a child's needs, then they can apply for special educational needs support. And the next step on from that is a legal process to apply for an education health care plan, which will support a student up to the age of 25.
Wow.
However, it's not an easy process. It
Hmm.
is can be a very protracted process with assembling evidence. Um, and a lot of the local councils, which you would call like states,
Hmm.
will say that they just don't have the funds to support these. So it's a difficult time, and I come across a lot of parents who attend my online courses who feel very much as though they're constantly battling the system to get the support their child needs.
Hmm. And then what about assessment? Like, we're getting better. It's been slow, but we're getting better in America of assessing our children, not just their academic achievement, and our assessments for that have gotten better, but in some schools that I'm going into, they really will even assess for learning differences or cognitive challenges in attention. Is any of that going on in the UK, or are within the general schools, is there some degree of assessment
Well, every school in the UK, well, I'll say in the UK, in England, I'm not so familiar with the situation in Scotland and Wales, but Scotland has a very good reputation for supporting children with learning differences.
happening?
Every school in England has access to a special educational needs coordinator. So they might not be based in the school. Some schools are like in little federations or groups, and you might have one Senko for the whole group, who is then travels from one school to another. Um, and that person is the one who is responsible as a professional for liaising with the class teacher, liaising with parents, and working out what kind of assessment is required, and then what provision can be put in place, as I said initially, within the
Mhm,
classroom, because
mhm.
schools won't get extra funding unless
Right.
they can prove that it's required.
Wow, interesting. Because at least for us, I'm not sure if this has happened. Our students are getting better. I was just at school actually 2 weeks ago, and I noticed I was in pre-K to third grade, and I did notice that the children were coming along developmentally better than they had the 2 years previous because of the whole pandemic. But you know, we have up to 30% of children in our classrooms who have some varying degree of need. You know, it could be everything from inattention to autism. So, you know, are your teachers trained at all in these neurodiversities? We're not as much. We're getting better, but you know, like things can be put in place, Mary, but I'm wondering, do the teachers know enough? Are they supported enough with the knowledge base?
Um, First of all, in England, we have a progression also in the sense that we have state primary schools, then we have schools which have like a unit attached to them that to provide more specialist support. Particularly large primaries may have like an autistic centre on site with specialists. And then we also have special schools as well,
Right.
which are obviously run by very specialist support staff.
Right.
I think in terms of the classroom teacher, it's pretty patchy. You get some schools that are really good and really open to training, and they'll come to like my online training in dyslexia or auditory processing difficulties. But in other schools, again, there is the perception that there just aren't the funds there, particularly, which has always been a bugbear of mine, to support those children who do not meet the criteria for extra support or assessment, but who clearly have difficulties.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's like they're too high functioning for their own good, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
Not great. As you know, when I'm working with children, or with teachers or schools, I'm always keen for them to step back and back and back, not
Right.
to rely totally on the cognitive testing or the phonics checks or all of these
Right.
things doing, but I'm asking them to do back and just do the really simple things like what's their static and dynamic balance like as
Yeah.
well.
Mm-hmm.
What
That's where I was heading next.
what's their basic motor skills? Can they sit on a chair? Can they do simple, fine motor activities with rhythm?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
this is where my big push is to get those
Right.
forms of assessment in place.
Right. It's wonderful. I mean, one of the reasons that you and I have kind of clicked so well is that in Europe, they and in the UK, my experience is that you guys are a little farther ahead than we are on understanding the role of the sensory motor system in learning. And I was going to ask you, when you are referred a child in your consultancy, how do you make the decision regarding where to begin in your treatment? Motor, language, cognitive? Just tell us a few of the steps that you go through, because I'm always interested in how different professionals around the world do that.
Okay, well, I have over the years, I've been a bit of a magpie in the sense that I like to pick up different disciplines, and as you said, that European universities, particularly places like Poland, for example, tend to be a long way ahead in terms of looking at physical assessments to inform interventions. And their interventions also typically will involve motor aspects, not just the cognitive aspects. So when I'm assessing children, as I said, I'm looking at the motor skills, and then I've tried to put together a program which recognizes that schools have targets that have to be met. So we have to be working on those cognitive skills, but at the same time, we need to recognize that they're sitting pretty much at the top of the pyramid of the whole child, and we've got to be working on the base as well if there's a need there. So
Right.
we've spoken before about Professor Crispiani, for example, of the University
Mm-hmm.
of Macerata in Italy, that I've had the honor of working with on many occasions now. And he combines in a very interesting way the cognitive and the motor. So we have children marching and doing cross patterns, but also doing flashcards or days of the week or other things at the same time. So it's a very holistic, multi-sensory approach. And this is what certainly is a more European approach. And I think in England and in Scotland, I can speak for this cause, early years teachers are really good.
They are. Your early years system is unbelievable.
Yeah, they are the best observers of a child's performance, if you like, both at a physical level, a play level, an emotional level, as well as their actual progress in the classroom. So I'm always saying in training as well, if I'm working with teachers in the primary sector, but rarely in the secondary sector, but in the primary sector, I said, you need to thank your teachers in the early years, because if they do a good job, then you can do an even better job. So it's recognizing their professionalism as informing later performance.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the honor to work with the Norland nannies in Bath, and
Yeah, they're lovely.
They know so much science. It's wild. I'm like, I would like to do a sabbatical. I would like to do 2 sabbaticals. I'd like to do one with the Norland nannies in Bath, and I would like to go to Macerata and stay for a month, stay for an extended time to really immerse myself in Professor Crispiani and Dr. Palmieri's program. All right, so as we close out here, Mary, you've been doing this a long time. You've been an expert in motor cognition for over 20 years. Do you have any tips, any just little pieces of knowledge or advice that you could offer our colleagues that would be interesting to them, but they may not find other places? Like, what comes front of mind for you?
Well, they're always welcome to contact me. Of course, you can give them my details. I always emphasize on my training, as I said, that getting in as much and as many different forms of movement as you can. So if you're working with children in the classroom or on a one-to-one basis or whatever, get them up and moving at least every 15, 20 minutes at the very most, depending on their age. And I try and build in dynamic movement, like walking forwards and backwards, working on the balance and coordination, just really fast, really fast. Static balance, doing some yoga poses. And I say to teachers that these are not going to detract from your teaching time. They're going to improve your teaching time. The more that you keep your learners active and dynamic, and don't overcrowd your classrooms with loads of displays and distractions, focus on precise language, quality movement at different speeds, and make sure that you actually have this as a whole school approach. So so that everybody who works with the kids knows that they need to modulate their tone. They need to speak a little bit more slowly. They need to pause whilst they're waiting for a response. Because as teachers, we always tend to jump in way too fast. And I say, just give children, particularly if they've got dyslexia issues or auditory processing issues or ADHD, just recognize that they might need a little bit longer to process what's going on and to make the appropriate responses.
Right. And don't flood them with language. That's one thing that I've even had to improve myself, because I'm a very chatty person, and I have to, just like you're saying, give the direction or the instruction or ask the question, then create this space between where you have a pause so that they have time to respond. I love that.
Also, streamline your speech. Take away all the words that you don't need. So, would you like to put your coat on and go outside?
Right.
Coats become coat outside. And using gestures, go over, under, use visual, use the widgets, the visual prompts. Just as a teacher and as a parent, we've got to think of ourselves more as a bit of a performer in some respects, as well as really drilling down into what is causing this problem and how can I solve the problem rather than accommodate it.
Yeah, I love it, Mary. You know, you're reminding me, one thing about when you teach or when I teach, there's so many things to talk about that I review all my stuff like, days and days before. I read a lot of articles in order for the most important things to float to the top. And what I'm really paying attention to right now, probably because the types of kids I'm seeing, is that when things look like one thing, it can be another.
Yeah.
Like I'll have a child who is referred for inattention, and I'll see when I'm doing my assessments that their either eye tracking is diminished or they've got saccadic jumping. So just really, I'm excited in this course to really talk about how all the pieces of language and the visual and the motor and the cognitive, that they all go together. Thank you so much for joining us. I really look forward to seeing you. We have to make sure that at some point we hop across the pond. We'll have to figure that out.
Well, I think we should be a little bit more ambitious and try to be a Matarata at the same time.
Okay. That sounds way more fun. All
Either
right.
that or the Norland nannies, because I would love to spend some time with the Norland nannies. They do.
Oh, I have to reintroduce you. They're so wonderful. All right. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing you very soon. Thank you so much for your time.